The final cut is a masterpiece. But the first draft is a war zone. This is between the frames. A long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. The text crawl, the blast of the fanfare, the Star Destroyer that seems to go on forever. These are some of the most iconic opening moments in film history. They feel inevitable, perfectly engineered to grab you and throw you into an adventure. But in early 1977, none of that existed. George Lucas had a completed film, but it was a Frankenstein's monster of confusing scenes, slow pacing, and a climax that left test audiences utterly baffled. The movie that would define a generation was, in its first assembly, considered by Lucas's closest peers to be completely unreleasable. This is the story of the small team of editors who stepped into the chaos and, through sheer editorial genius, saved Star Wars. To appreciate the rescue, we first have to understand the disaster. Lucas's first rough cut, assembled in late 1976, was a structural and tonal nightmare. How bad was it? Well, forget the epic opening in space. The film originally began not with a bang, but with a whimper, right on Tatooine. We'd see Luke Skywalker just watching the space battle through binoculars. It was a distant, disconnected spectacle that had zero impact. Imagine the most exciting event in the galaxy happening, and you're watching it like a tourist from miles away. That was the introduction. The problems didn't stop there. The pace was glacial. Scenes dragged on and on. All the cool, mystical stuff about the Force and the evil Empire was explained in clunky, front-loaded dialogue that would put you to sleep. It felt less like a space opera and more like a lecture. And the characters? They weren't the icons we know and love. Princess Leia's introduction was weak. She lacked the fire and command we associate with her. The witty, crackling dynamic between Han Solo and Chewbacca, it just wasn't sharp yet. And Luke Skywalker, our hero, came across as more whiny and annoying than heroic and relatable. It was hard to root for anyone. But the biggest catastrophe was the climax. The Death Star trench run, the entire nail-biting third act of the film, was a complete mess. It was just a confusing jumble of shots. There was no clear geography. You couldn't tell where the X-Wings were in relation to the TIE fighters or the Death Star's surface. There was no rising tension, no sense of a ticking clock. It was impossible to follow what was happening, who was winning, or why you should even care. After a screening for his director friends, a group that included heavyweights like Brian De Palma and Steven Spielberg, the feedback was absolutely brutal. De Palma famously ridiculed the opening text, which at the time was long and convoluted. The consensus was unanimous and devastating. The film was a confusing, boring mess. George Lucas, exhausted from a grueling production and now facing this wave of criticism, was reportedly disillusioned and ready to accept that his passion project was a total failure. But then, the heroes of our story entered the picture. The pivotal mechanism that saved Star Wars wasn't a special effect or a last-minute reshoot. It was the intervention of 3 editors: Paul Hirsch, Richard Chew, and Marcia Lucas, who was George's wife at the time. They were handed this cinematic train wreck and given a near-impossible task: rebuild the entire film from the ground up in a matter of weeks. And what they did was nothing short of miraculous. Their first and most brilliant move was tackling the disastrous opening. They proposed ditching the weak Tatooine beginning entirely. Just throw it out. Instead, they came up with the idea for the iconic opening crawl. They wrote that text from scratch, creating a simple, powerful way to dump all the necessary exposition right at the beginning. It is a period of civil war. Rebel spaceships, striking from a hidden base, have won their first victory. It gets you up to speed instantly and frees the movie to start in medias res, right in the middle of the action, with that jaw-dropping shot of the Star Destroyer chasing the rebel ship. Next, they completely restructured the first act. They knew they had to get the audience on Luke's side and into the adventure much faster. So they moved Luke's introduction earlier in the film, intercutting his scenes with C-3PO and R2-D2's journey across the desert. This created parallel action and built momentum. They trimmed tons of excessive dialogue, pushing the story forward to get us to the Mos Eisley Cantina, one of the film's highlights, much quicker. They reshaped entire scenes to emphasize the character moments that were actually working, like Han's cool and confident confrontation with Greedo. They weren't just assembling scenes. They were finding the story. But their true masterstroke, the thing that cemented their genius, was rebuilding the trench run. This was the make-or-break sequence. The original cut, as we said, was a confusing pile of repetitive, poorly angled shots, so the editors essentially reconceived it from scratch. They broke it down into a 3-act structure within the sequence. First, the approach to the Death Star. Second, the fight against the defense turrets. And finally, the final desperate run down the trench. To do this, they got creative. They reused and reordered shots from other parts of the battle to create a clear spatial map for the audience. You could finally understand the geography of the fight. They used quick cuts to build a relentless, rising tension that just wasn't there before. Crucially, they added quick reaction shots, cutting to a worried Princess Leia in the command center, to Han Solo making his last-minute decision, to the officers on the rebel base. These cuts heightened the stakes immensely. We weren't just watching spaceships explode. We were experiencing the battle through the eyes of the characters we cared about. They essentially directed the entire climax right there on the editing bench, using only the footage they had. This massive editorial overhaul did more than just fix problems. It injected the film with its revolutionary spirit and its magic. The breakneck pace the editors established became a hallmark of the new Hollywood style, but applied to a classic pulp adventure. It made the film feel young, modern, and urgent. It was a pace that grabbed you by the collar and didn't let go for 2 hours. And through their cutting choices, they brought an emotional clarity to the spectacle. By constantly focusing on character reactions, a determined look from Luke, a flash of fear on a pilot's face, a triumphant cheer, they humanized the action. The audience didn't just watch a spaceship battle. They felt invested in the people inside those ships. The fate of the galaxy rested on their shoulders, and thanks to the editing, we felt that weight with them. Marcia Lucas's contribution here is particularly noteworthy and often undersung. While Hirsch and Chu focused on action and structure, she was the guardian of the film's emotional heart. She fought for the character moments, sharpening Luke's hero's journey from whiny farm boy to confident hero. She understood that the big moments only land if you care about the small ones. It's said she was instrumental in shaping the iconic "I love you, I know" exchange between Leia and Han in The Empire Strikes Back, a testament to her focus on the emotional through line that made the series resonate so deeply. Her Oscar for Best Editing, shared with Hirsch and Chu, was a recognition of work that was truly creative and authorial, not just technical. At a time when studio editing was often a more passive, assembly line process, this team worked like narrative surgeons, actively rewriting the film's story with scissors and tape. So what's the real legacy here? The principle is powerful. Editing as rewriting. The saviors of Star Wars understood that their job wasn't just to arrange the footage they were given in the correct order. Their job was to find the best possible movie hidden within that footage, even if it meant tearing it all down and starting over. For any creator, the lesson is profound. Surround yourself with collaborators who are brave enough to tell you the hard truth, to tell you when your work isn't working. But more importantly, find collaborators who are talented enough to offer a concrete solution to help you find the magic you might have missed. The most successful and beloved creative project in modern history was, at one crucial point, a complete and utter failure. It was saved by the art of the cut, by a team that saw a masterpiece where others saw a mess. What piece of culture do you think was saved by a similar behind-the-scenes fix? A song, a book, another movie? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this look between the frames, be sure to subscribe for more stories about how the art you love gets made. Thanks for watching.